Thanks for coming. What we thought we would do today is give an overview. Some of this information we've given you in different contexts, but we haven't packaged it all around the sustainable energy utility. And so today what we thought we'd do is really give you the specifics of things as opposed to the general philosophy and the concepts. Okay. So if you remember, one of the key problems that we're citing that we're at a juncture at has to do with a couple of things. And one is, most obviously, the role of energy and the high price of energy as we move into a new economic transition. What you see here are, we charted the prices of all the fuel oils or the fuel sources using year 2000, just year 2000 as a base, just so that we could show people, even in this last, at the turn of the century, what we're looking at in terms of energy costs overall. Where you see the dark piece, that's basically at 150%. Anything above that is what we've experienced, extremely high fluctuations in energy prices. That's to give people an idea that we have entered into a new era of energy and development in the industrialized world. Now, the developing world has been in this situation for quite some time of not being able to access fuel sources and energy for development. So it's kind of interesting to hear U.S. and industrialized countries talk about the high price of energy when a good proportion of the world has been in this situation for quite some time. Oops. This again, I think, is something you've all seen. This gets at the greenhouse gases. In terms of the energy sector and the agricultural sector, where IATP, your work and SEED's work is integrating, is around the top three, obviously. Carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas that largely comes from the burning of fossil fuels, and so is an energy-based greenhouse gas. And then you have methane and nitrous oxide, which are the principal greenhouse gases associated with agriculture and land use change. I won't get into all the technical details of all the greenhouse gases and the global warming potential that is associated with this, but just as a background, each greenhouse gas has very different chemical and physical properties, and therefore has a very different relationship to global warming. That's why the term global warming potential is used. That's sort of a term, yeah. So when you see terms like, you'll see carbon dioxide, but then you'll see the term carbon dioxide equivalent. And that's to sort of standardize the comparison of all the greenhouse gases potential. So you'll see like methane, every country, Annex 1 country, has to do an inventory of their greenhouse gases. So when you see these other gases, you'll usually see them in terms called carbon dioxide equivalent, CO2e. That just means that there's a formula that goes into this to adjust for the physical and chemical properties of different gases and to be able to standardize comparison across all greenhouse gases in terms of carbon dioxide. Okay?
What about these other, CFC 11, 12, and 20?
These are what are called high global warming gases. They're very intense. The difference, of course, is that we're sort of supposedly have we're decreasing the emissions of those gases as opposed to carbon dioxide, which is a very, very large emitting greenhouse gas. But yeah, these are still a greenhouse gas.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we keep emphasizing why the sustainable energy utility is important is we have developed in the industrialized world this model that high energy or energy plus economic activity equals GDP, basically, right? That economic development requires large inputs of energy to sustain itself. And if you look historically, the graph just basically points that out. The more energy a society uses, the higher its GDP growth. But what we're trying to emphasize is that's not just an automatic, that's not a given. We've created an energy supply system, which in the paper that you'll see, results in an obese energy system, is the way we're talking about it. When we didn't have to worry about energy prices or access to energy, either because, and here's where the equity piece comes in, either because we created laws and policies to access coal, oil, etc. at below cost prices, we were able to exploit those resources and produce a very high abundant energy machine. We created an energy machine, a whole energy apparatus that was built on, we didn't have to worry about efficiency because we could just go get the coal and burn it, and we could go get the oil and from Nigeria, from wherever we wanted, and be able to use it cheaply. Our energy system was highly subsidized by both foreign and domestic policy. So now we have this obese, and we had certain policies in place. Please jump in anytime, okay? We had certain policies in place because there was this sort of understanding, this built-in assumption that economic growth was dependent on continued use of energy and continued growth of energy supply. So very early on, and particularly in the post-World War II era, there was a real push to build more and more energy supply system. And one of the classic examples that we use is nuclear power. Because if you think about nuclear power, there was not a demand for nuclear power when it was developed. There was no shortage of energy at the time nuclear power was developed. And in fact, the engineers and the scientists said full well that it was going to be a long time before nuclear power was economically viable. Nuclear power wasn't developed because we needed more energy. Nuclear power was developed because we thought we were going to need more energy down the line. We're always building for future growth. That's what you'll hear even in the discussions, even around renewables, okay, and other kinds of energies, that we need to invest in the further development of energy because we're going to need it further down the line for economic growth. For us, that's a real problem because it'll never be enough. It's like this never-ending drain, right? You're always forecasting for future growth, and there's never going to be enough supply to do it. There are also things like, very intentionally, and if you go look, you all know, if you go look at the advertisements and whatnot, and Life magazine, and all the things that were happening in post-World War II, it was to actually encourage demand, right? That was when you had the electrification of all kinds of things. You had dishwashers coming into being, clothes dryers coming into being. Think about the amount of energy it takes to generate enough heat to dry your clothes in half an hour, okay? It was because we just assumed we had the energy available to be able to do these functions. And we actually put in place pricing mechanisms to encourage more energy demand. So there were things like block rates, where if how much you paid per kilowatt hour was based on how much you used. And the point was you wanted to encourage more energy use so you could use the supply that was available. And let me get to that in a second. But if you used, like, for example, 1,000 kilowatt hours per month, you may be paid, 7 cents per kilowatt hour. If you used 1,000 to 5,000 kilowatts per month, you maybe used 5 cents, you maybe paid 5 cents per kilowatt hour. And if you were industry and you used 20,000 kilowatt per month, you maybe paid 3 cents per kilowatt hour, okay? So the intention was really to subsidize large energy users.
And that's still how our rate system is structured currently.
So there's no incentive to save, right? Or to be efficient, because the more you pay, the more the more it's the bulk kind of mentality. The other thing to note, and maybe you want to jump in a little bit here, is about the way the electric system is set up and the energy system is set up in terms of a grid, and how we have to build. Do you want to tell me about why we have to build for peak load?
Yeah, well, in order to sort of always say that we can keep the lights on, and for example, the electricity use that we use, if you imagine sort of how you use electricity, it tends to, most people have their air conditioners on in the summer, and so that's sort of considered peak load. And so this is what people are using internationally. So I mean, this is sort of the way energy development is happening. So based on that maximum need in the summer, they will build a power plant. So they will say, oh, we need 1,000 megawatts to feed this community in the summer, even though it may be down to like 100 in the winter. They will build for that 1,000. And so suddenly you have this, that's like 2 coal plants that are that are built to meet that peak load. Major capital investment. You need to recoup that capital investment. You need to sell more electricity. Does that make sense? So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right? So if the peak, you have to build for peak load. You have to build for when the most energy is being demanded. Like here it is the summer air conditioner use, kind of the hottest days of the year, right? That's when everybody is using their air conditioners and the demand for electricity is really high. Well, unless Xcel and all the power and all the utilities have supply to meet that peak demand, you're going to have brownouts and blackouts. That's a no-no. We don't want that. That destroys that machinery, all that kind of stuff. So you have to build. The deal is you have to build enough supply. You have to build coal plants which generate the power. You have to build the transmission lines. You have to build the utilities. You have to build all of that infrastructure to meet that one peak demand, even if the rest of the year or other days is down. So now you have idle plant capacity and distribution capacity, but you still have the investment, the cost that was associated in building all of that energy supply, so you have to recoup it somehow. And that's why we say that supply side systems are very inefficient, and that policies, most energy policies that we put in place today, are intended to support and subsidize that same system. Okay. Now, why the SEU is important is we do calculations around, and usually what it's called is demand side management or demand side efficiency. Instead of looking at the problem as supplying more and more energy, what if we looked at the problem of how do we shave the need for more demand, for more consumption? Okay? Because then you can reduce that demand and you don't have to build so much supply, less costly. This is a graph that we put together that shows it's called the levelized cost per kilowatt hour. And what that means, levelized cost means the entire cost of generating a kilowatt hour, which means the actual price, the cost of the fuel, plus the cost of building the plant, plus the cost of distribution, fixed cost, fuel cost, everything, okay, is put in. And so if you look at this, in each one of these states, this is how much people paying, this is a range, how much people are paying per kilowatt hour of electricity, okay?
For a new kilowatt or for just their daily bill?
Just for their daily bill.
Okay.
Yeah, it's average.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
just
built
an
in, the new
average.
stuff is
Yeah.
built
This is how much it would cost if they actually purchased efficiency mechanisms. In other words, this is the cost of electricity saved. Okay, so if you buy, for example, a more efficient water heater, okay, and you're saving a certain amount of energy by buying that efficiency water heater, this is the actual amount, the cost of that kilowatt hour saved. This is what energy people use to show the cost of efficiency versus the cost of supply. Everybody, does that make sense? Everybody on board? Okay, so, doesn't take rocket science, right, to figure out that efficiency is much less costly than actually producing the stuff, right? So why don't we? I mean, if the difference is that huge, right, why aren't we just investing in more efficiency and stop arguing about building more coal plants, clean coal, you know, the whole range of stuff?
We don't feel like it.
We don't feel like it.
Because we leave our policy to the suppliers, the ones who make money by selling electricity, not by saving electricity.
Yeah, that's the info, yeah.
What is cost effective for people? So it's really about where do the policy sort of efforts and dollars go? Because right now there's no infrastructure to help you save energy, or very minimal. But there's a great infrastructure to help you buy energy. All you have to do is flip the switch.
A quick answer is we've already invested in energy supply systems, right? And folks want to recoup their costs. I mean, it's in the best interest of Excel to make sure that it sells as much electricity as possible and be able to generate the revenue and profit that it needs to maintain itself. It's in the business of selling kilowatt hours. It's not in the business of selling efficiency, right? Except when it's forced to at a policy level.
Actually, I have a question about the graph, even though you asked if we all understood. I'm not sure I do. So for instance, in California, the 10 to 16, is that, that's,
That's the
Cents
average
per-
cost of kilowatt hours to buy electricity.
for a consumer?
Yeah.
How do you get to the, whatever that is, the 3 cents an hour?
This is, for a lot of, it's demand side management, it's investing in efficiency, it's investing in CFLs, all the things that you know about in terms of efficient refrigerators, efficient this, efficient solar water heaters, efficient CFLs. You save kilowatt hours, right? You save because you don't use it. So it's
But
like,
are you saying that an individual,
Mhm.
a person living in California who did everything he or she could, as an individual, would be paying that much today under the supply side?
No, what we're saying is, given the choice, if they're what you're getting out of turning on the switch is an energy service, right? You're not buying electricity just for the sake of buying electricity. You're buying electricity for the sake of turning on light. Use that for example. So what you want is light, right? How much does it cost for you to turn on the light and have the same level of illumination in your room that you need? Well, if you were to do it just straight up, okay, the old way, it would cost you about 12 to 16 cents per kilowatt hour. If you wanted that same illumination and you used an energy efficient bulb, the same amount of illumination would actually translate into about 3 cents per kilowatt hour. Because you're using less, you're being more efficient with.
Right, but that's
energy.
something I could do as an individual.
Exactly.
I guess what I'm asking is are those lower, the white boxes, the white bars, does that represent something that even under the existing system of pricing, individuals could achieve themselves if they were 100% efficient in their choices today? If every light bulb in my house is the right kind of light bulb, if I have the newest, most efficient
Yes,
appliances
this is based on actual data.
of
okay,
what
this
an
is
individual
actual.
can do.
It's aggregated.
Yeah.
It's not like you as an individual, it's aggregated data for the state with given the amount of energy that was used, given the energy services, this is on average what it would cost to engage in efficiency. This is what it would cost to buy.
But is that maybe, I mean, it's maybe the way to think about it is like, you know, so you flip on your switch and right now, because it's all about supply side, you know, to get that kilowatt or whatever, you need to turn on your lights. You're looking at a supply provision, so you're making electricity, all that's that cost. Instead, you could be getting that same electricity from savings, really from somewhere else in the system probably. I mean, including the bulb, but the aggregate savings that the system could invest in, like, you know, fixing peak load somewhere over here, or doing this energy efficient thing, but it's not.
It's not.
It's
It's
not.
aggregate.
It's not us walking
Yeah.
around and doing all the energy
Okay.